Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southern-appalachian-herbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, Southern Appalachian Herbs at blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. Boy, it's a chilly one out there, isn't it? Oh, I was just outside walking the dog, and it's pretty cold and icy and snowy here. But oh, I tell you, I was looking at the big vaccine mandate rally today, anti-vaccine mandate rally today in D.C., and those people are dedicated because it is like 15 degrees and it looks horrible. Frankly, I don't think there's ever a good time of year to go to Washington, D.C. It's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter, the traffic's horrible, the crime's out of control. It's probably one of the worst places on earth, in my opinion. And I used to love to go to the Smithsonian such as a kid, but I hate DC now for many reasons. I would not even set foot in that town. But speaking of cold places, I have found a really good book I just want to recommend real quick. You know, I love Polish culture. I love Polish food. I just have a strong affinity for Poland for no apparent reason. I'm not Polish by descent. I think maybe somewhere back in my ancestry, I may have had a Slavic ancestor, but I'm not sure. I picked up a book called Polish Herbs, Flowers, and Folk Medicine. And let's see, what is the name of the author? Sophie Hodorowicz, of course, Polish name, right? I can't pronounce it. Nab is her last name, so maiden name was Hodorowicz, I guess. Um, anyway, beautiful book. It's just really neat book. It talks all about um, the culture, the history of folk medicine in Poland, the use of herbs, flowers, all kinds of plants in holidays and religious ceremonies. And it's just a really neat book of history and, herbal medicine and just the culture. I think Poland just has such a beautiful, vibrant, wonderful culture. And wow. One of my best friends is right next door to Poland. She's in Ukraine. She lives in Odessa. And I'm just going to ask y'all to say a prayer for the people of Ukraine because, I've spoken with her recently, and basically, the people of Ukraine are hoping things aren't going to be as bad as our media is portraying it. I think she said one time the Russians come and go. They usually don't cause too much trouble, but the soldiers are very rude to women. So, uh, you know, just say a prayer for the Ukrainian people because they're a great, strong, wonderful people as well. And if you know anything about the history of Ukraine, um, I mean, the Soviets slaughtered tens of millions of people in one of the worst genocides in history, even though the country of Ukraine is half Russian, But the Soviets, it was one of the worst genocides literally in history. And the New York Times covered it up. They didn't let anybody know till after the fact. They lied about the whole thing. Why? Well, they were on the side of the Soviets. They were on Stalin's side. That's what it comes down to. I don't think they're on our side now, actually, either. So don't believe a lot of what you see in the news, but do pray for the Ukrainian people and innocent people in all parts of the world. Um, A lot of bad stuff going on in the world these days. Genocide's not being reported. The Uyghurs, for instance, the people of Hong Kong and Taiwan are in extreme danger. And ancient Christian communities throughout Afghanistan, Syria, they're being slaughtered, and no one's protecting. No one's lifting a finger to do anything to protect these churches that have been there since the time of Christ's disciples and all the people that are good, decent, hardworking people, people of different religions, people of different beliefs that usually get along fairly well, but governments are, kind of out of control these days. Governments are kind of out of control worldwide as the incredible marches of hundreds of thousands of people we saw throughout Europe yesterday that got basically no news coverage in the United States. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people marching through London, marching through Paris, marching in Austria and Australia and all over the world for freedom. And you're in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Uh, our media just decided it wasn't worth covering because, we're brave new world now. Who's supposed to care about individual rights and freedoms? All right, so on to herbs. All right, let's go to a chapter in my book. This is from Herbal Medicine for Preppers, Homesteaders, and Permaculture People. One of the 4 books I've written. You can find them on Amazon if you want the paperback copy. You can get the ebook directly from my blog, southern-appalachian-herbs.blogspot.com. I hope you will. And let's talk about a chapter in there on herbs for fevers. Now, we've talked already about colds and flus and all that, so I'm not going to get into a whole lot of that. I'm just going to kind of focus on fever specific. Now, herbalists kind of think about fevers a little differently than a lot of people, in our society of having such easy over-the-counter products, aspirin, Tylenol, and such, to lower a fever. Um, we just kind of want to avoid a fever, right? I mean, fevers are uncomfortable. Nobody likes having a fever, but a fever is not always a bad thing. I mean, actually, fever is part of your body's immune response. That's part of how your body fights off the viruses and bacteria. It raises your body temperature to help make an in-hospital environment for the germs that are making you sick. So when we avoid a fever, at all costs, or we just do it knee jerk out of habit, we're actually can be doing ourselves more harm than good. Now, obviously, there are times when fever is a bad thing, especially small children and infants. They can spike a fever very quickly, and it can be incredibly dangerous. It can be deadly. It can cause brain damage. I mean, you got to take fever very seriously in small children, in weakened people, people that are very elderly, people who are immunocompromised. But for strong, healthy, vibrant people, we're probably making a big mistake when we just run for the aspirin. I mean, I've mentioned before that when I was working at a drugstore years ago, the pharmacist was a great guy, and we talked a lot about herbs and such. And he was very interested in what I knew, and I was very interested in what he knew. So we were always talking shop, basically. And, you know, one day we were talking about the subject of fever and pain, and he told me, he started showing me all the research on how toxic Tylenol is, acetaminophen, um, not necessarily name brand Tylenol, all acetaminophen, okay? It destroys your liver. It is one of the most toxic substances we put in our body on a regular basis. He said that, half the people that he had encountered that, came in with cirrhosis of the liver was actually caused by Tylenol, not by drinking. Okay. And he said basically you can either take Tylenol or you can drink alcohol, but you cannot do both. In his words, I'd rather have a scotch. Okay. Aspirin is another you know, pharmaceutically made product. I mean, it's not the natural willow bark that, once was. And it's probably not all that great for you either, but at least it doesn't destroy your liver. And a lot of people speculate and wonder how Tylenol has stayed on the market. Well, follow the money. Look at who funds the studies, look at who funds the government agencies, look at who funds the politicians that get elected that appoint the heads of those agencies and the companies the heads of those agencies go to work for after the fact. Um, the whole acetaminophen industry is actually very tied into the petroleum industry. So take that with a grain of salt. And of course, it's also very the various companies that manufacture these products. I mean, you know, Bayer and different ones. I'm not trying to disparage any particular kind of company, but I'm just saying a lot of these companies have their hands in pesticides, agricultural chemicals. They've been involved in chemical warfare and, World War II in Korea and Agent Orange, for instance, in Vietnam. So, you know, they could probably use a little more skepticism than we treat them with, right? But when we get into herbs, we gotta kind of look at this two ways, all right? So we can try to lower a fever like we would if we were taking aspirin, right? Well, there are several herbs that do that. There are herbs that contain salicin, which was the original compound that aspirin was based on, salicylic acid. This has actually been known for a long time. I mean, this is one of those myths they teach in herb schools. Um, I think it actually came from an old episode of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Okay, this is this is the source, I believe, for this legend that American doctors were so amazed to learn about willow bark from the Native Americans, and that's how aspirin entered into our world. Well, no, actually Dioscorides in De Materia Medica, writing what, 60 AD, 60, 70 AD, talked about the use of willow. Maybe people forgot about it for a while, but the the folk medicine, the monastic medicine of the Middle Ages, um, German folk medicine, they certainly never forgot it, and it was German scientists who created aspirin. So, yeah, it exactly come from Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Let's put it that way. Now, another aspect of like a dangerous fever, if you got to get it down, um, cold water baths. They're not always the best thing to do. In hospitals, a lot of times they'll do alcohol baths. It's just pulling heat out of the body. That's sort of like an emergency thing. Let's hope things don't quite get that way. But, if you have a small child, look into that. Or if you're caring for a weakened person and that fever really starts to spike, if that's a viable option, that's something you need to know about and know how to do. So I'm not really addressing that in this book, other than to say that Father Nape, his first recommendation was to wrap somebody in a wet sheet or put on a wet shirt. Okay, so I mean, this is again folk medicine. It's been used for a long time and it's very valid. But herbs are more my wheelhouse, right? So let's talk about a few more of these herbs that have salicin. Okay, there's meadowsweet. Father Kunzel wrote about meadowsweet in Herbs and Weeds. He included sort of a herbal formula for fevers. He would put meadowsweet together with hedge bindweed. That's wild morning glory, actually a very useful herb, and globe daisy, and make a tea of that to lower fevers. Dead nettle. Dead nettle is lamium. It grows all over the place in my yard. It's a really good herb. Very good. It helps lower fevers. Like I said, willow, but there are other trees too. Like, first of all, there are a lot of willows. And then there's the closely related poplars. I think, yeah, there are over 62 varieties of salix. That's the willow species. And then 23 varieties of populus. So put them together, and we've got, 86 trees that are probably growing anywhere near you. I mean, look out, next time you're driving around or walking around, look for a willow tree. They're very specific looking. They have these long fronds that kind of, wave in the wind. I mean, poplars are super easy to identify. If you don't know what they look like, just pull up an image on your phone or whatever, grab a field guide. You can start spotting willows and poplars everywhere. Keep them in mind so you know where they are when you need them, right? So you can collect that in advance and have it in your cabinet. No big deal. Birch is another one. So birch contains a similar compound to salicin. It's methyl salicylate, very similar to willows and poplars, but that's also what they make wintergreen oil out of. So it has some really good antibiotic properties. It has some really good anti-inflammatory properties. Good for arthritis, good for fevers, good for a lot of stuff. Let's see. I think I mentioned meadowsweet already, but if I didn't, meadowsweet. That was actually one of the sacred herbs of the Druids. They were obviously very aware of its ability to lower fever and considered it, like a magical plant. Very common in America is violet. We're talking wood violet, sweet violet, Johnny jump ups, wild violets, the ornamental violets like the Johnny jump ups. It's viola tricolor, I believe. One of the prettiest flowers. I think it's really one of my favorites. These are really, I've talked about it before, as a wild edible. You know, we forage for violets. They're delicious. What we're not talking about here, obviously, is African violets. African violet is a completely different plant. It's not going to help you. I think it's poisonous. I'm pretty sure it's poisonous anyway. Double check on that. But we're actually talking, sweet violet, wood violet, just the various violets. Um, some of them, if you have too much, they said to have a laxative effect. So keep that in mind. But I've eaten plenty of violets and never had any problems at all. And viburnum. Viburnum, which is guelder rose or cramp bark. Also, black haw. It's believed to contain salicin. I looked, and I think it varies by species. Some may have more than others. And anyway, it is believed to have salicin, and it has been used specifically for fevers. And yeah, black haw was very much used by the Native Americans and early settlers in the United States, especially in the South, as a fever reducer. Now, the other category of herbs are what we call resolving a fever. This isn't actually, lowering the body temperature through the use of salicin or something. This is helping to break a fever. Now, you've all had a fever before. You feel horrible. You feel sick. You're chilled. Maybe you get in bed and cover up, and then suddenly you just start sweating and you feel exhausted, but you feel so much better, right? Well, that's when your fever has broken. We can use herbs that help induce sweating. We can use herbs that help raise the body temperature a little bit. What we're doing is we're bringing on the breaking of the fever faster. We're helping the fever do its work and helping ourselves feel better more quickly than we would if we were just, letting the fever run its course, without assistance. So these kind of, like I said, break down into specific herbs. We've got what we call diaphoretics and all this. I'm not going to get into these two big terms, but I'm going to kind of tell you some of these herbs and what they do. It can be as simple, literally, as drinking a hot cup of tea, taking a hot bath, especially a hot cup of ginger tea. Our ancestors used to be big believers in plasters. They would put like goose fat and brown paper on your chest. What that would do, it would hold in your body heat and it would increase your body temperature and it would reduce sweating. Other remedies they used were mustard plasters. They would take, say, powdered mustard, or it can be the vegetable mustard, whatever you want to look at it this way. These are hot. They have sort of a horseradish type of heat to them. And put on the skin, they're a rubefacient. They redden and warm the skin. And a mustard plaster can actually burn you, believe it or not, if it's left on too long. And this is seriously just the same mustard we have in condiments. But it actually is very strong. And that was one of the favored ways to help break a fever, actually. Used as a plaster on the chest. Like I said, ginger, also really great to add to your bath water. I think my favorite of the, I'll call it a spice tea that I use that helps with the fever. I actually, I just enjoy sipping on this tea. It's a great one for cold mornings like today. You take just say a fourth teaspoon to a half teaspoon of black pepper, cinnamon, turmeric, ginger, and a little bit of ground clove. Put that in hot water, stir it up. You can add honey and lemon. You can add a little milk. You can add a little molasses. It's kind of nice. It will warm you up incredibly. It's just amazing. The first time I tried it, I couldn't believe it. I had I had a fever. I think that was the reason I made it, but I was just chilled to the bone. And I made this tea, and I just got warm all over and started sweating, and I felt better immediately. I had like maybe a month or two later, it was the dead of winter. My feet were cold. I'd been out in the snow and ice. I was wet. Oh, I had, I was getting frostbite. My, fingers had gone numb and everything. And I went in and I thought, I'm going to try that tea again. And I made that tea, and the warmth just spread throughout my body. And it was like, wow. So now, on cold mornings, if I'm heading to the woods, um, a cup of this tea and then, bundle up. And it's also stimulating. Those spices are stimulating. So you may not want to drink this tea too close to bedtime because it can actually keep you awake. It's just a very sweet, spicy, enjoyable beverage that is really incredibly good for you. Several of those herbs are antivirals, antibiotics. They're all anti-inflammatory. They just have wonderful qualities. Let's see, some other herbs for inducing sweating, using as a diaphoretic, trying to help break a fever. Father Coons will recommend Pimpinella or Burnet saxifrage. That's actually Pimpinella saxifraga in its Latin name. Wood Avens, which is Geum. Its plant goes by several different names, but it's in the Geum family. And Lady's Mantle. He said, Lady's Mantle, well boiled and drunk warm, relieves a headache, heals cold in the head, eye infection, and often other headaches, toothaches. It heals fever, burns, suppurations, and ulcers, etc., etc., etc. So, he really liked Lady's Mantle for a lot of illnesses. Maria Trevin recommended butterbur, chamomile, and of course Swedish bitters. But these are taken as a hot tea. Butterbur has a long use. It was a popular herb used during the plague. Um, there's some contraindications with it. Chamomile is generally considered safe, and a good hot tea of chamomile is a nice way to help break a fever and very soothing, very nice for the nerves. Makes people a little sleepy sometimes. People like to give it to fussy babies. But Swedish bitters, it does help with a fever. It contains gentian. Now, gentian is a good fever herb. It's a bitter herb. It's good for the liver. There's several herbs actually in Swedish bitters, depending on which formula you use. But gentian is one of the main ones, and it will definitely help lower fever a little bit, help you break a fever. False Solomon seal, used to promote sweating and urination. Sarsaparilla, sarsaparilla, leaf tea or a root tincture. Now, one that I like to use, and you may not, as I've mentioned before, is poke. Yeah, I love to eat poke greens. I use the root of poke medicinally. Now, remember, poke is poisonous. Too much poke in too strong a concentration can kill you. The herbalist Michael Moore said a half ounce of a strong poke root tincture could be fatal. Now, that said, I think I've probably built up a tolerance to poke because, like last year when I had COVID-19, and it was just lingering and lingering and lingering, especially with these low-grade fevers. I remembered I had where a poke plant was growing in the yard because it was winter time. So I went out there and dug it up, and I took the root and I ate a little bit, and I started perspiring. My fever broke. I felt better immediately because poke is also a lymph cleanser. It was flushing a lot of the dead virus and the toxins out of my body. So really good. I like it. It's up to you whether you want to investigate that one or not. I'm not recommending it. Obviously, I don't make any recommendations, do I? Yarrow. Yarrow is a really interesting herb. The tea, taken hot, it promote sweating. Taking cold, it actually has the opposite effect. So it's what we call an energetic herb. It decreases secretions taken cold. It helps stop bleeding, for instance. But taken hot is really good to help break a fever. Lemon balm, it's Melissa officinalis. Again, like chamomile, it's a mild sedative. It's really good for fevers and really one of the most pleasant of teas. All the mints, all your peppermint, your spearmint, your apple mint, all that. They are diaphoretic. They're soothing to the lungs and sore throat. Good for headaches and upset stomachs. I mean, again, mint tea, classic. Likewise, catnip, which is in the same family. Catnip's useful for promoting sweating and lung fevers. Seneca snake root is one of our more common American herbs that a lot of people don't know about, but the root tea is used to induce sweating, and it's also very good for lung congestion. Boneset is classic. That's Eupatorium. Um, Boneset, there were malarial fevers, typhoid fevers in the early part of the country, and they were called breakbone fever because the fever was so high it felt like your bones were breaking, right? Well, Native Americans told the settlers about boneset, which was very much like feverfew in Europe in its effects. A lot of people confuse the two plants even though they look nothing alike. Boneset is an excellent herb for fevers. It's also immune stimulating and helps cure congestion. Wild quinine, which is a parthenium, is, that's actually in the same family as feverfew, if I'm not mistaken. Let me think. Wild quinine is Parthenium integrifolium, and feverfew is Chrysanthemum parthenium. So no, they're not the same actually, but very very similar in effect. You could put these three herbs, just classify them together: boneset, wild quinine, feverfew. Wild quinine is especially used for what they call intermittent fevers, such as occur with malaria. But it also has some good antiviral properties, and it's a really good one to have around for fevers and colds and flus and all kinds of stuff. And I'll just go ahead and get a feverfew. That's the classic herb in Europe, basically. As the name says, feverfew. Fewer fevers if you use this tea, right? The whole plant can be used. So it's an easy plant to keep on hand. It can be a little tricky to grow in the garden, depending on where you live. It's a southern European plant, so it kind of likes a warmer climate, whereas like boneset, Joe pieweed, which is also a eupatorium, can be used interchangeably and will grow, I think, down to USDA hardiness zone 3A, if I'm not mistaken, even maybe even 2B. So we're talking like temperatures that get to minus 45, as opposed to feverfew, which I don't believe grows colder than maybe 5B, which is where I live. I'm at zone 5B. Plenty darn cold, but not as cold. Um, it's what they call stinking chamomile. I have mentioned this herb before. It is not a chamomile. It's Anthemis catula, but tea is used to induce sweating, and it's got a lot of good uses. Sounds horrible, but it doesn't smell as bad as they say. Marsh marigold, the root is used to induce sweating. Yeah, that's an herb some people have some concerns with because handling the plant blisters the skin. It can cause severe contact dermatitis. And if you have other options, maybe there are better options. Now, coral root is a really interesting herb. It's Coleorrhiza. The root is used to break fevers. It really warms you from the inside. It causes profuse sweating, as they say. Blessed thistle, a long history of use, especially in Europe, to promote sweating and for a variety of ailments from liver conditions to menstrual issues. Blessed thistle is a really good plant. Goldenrod, just plain old goldenrod, Saladega, Canada goldenrod grows very abundantly in my area. Nice leaf tea of goldenrod is, well, both are pretty good actually. I'm going to say leaf and flower tea. You can have a little bit of both. They're tasty and really good for fevers and colds and all kinds of stuff. Wild ginger is kind of pressured, endangered. It's one of the prettiest little plants. Even I rarely find it in the woods, and it grows more commonly where I live than most places. In early America, people just were crazy with ginger. I mean, they were putting ginger in everything, all kinds of gingerbread, ginger ales, and ginger was expensive. It had to be imported. And they discovered wild ginger. It's not actually a ginger, but it tastes and smells almost identical to regular ginger. And people just went out and started collecting it like crazy, and still the plant really hasn't recovered from over harvesting. So use store-bought fresh ginger if you can. And the pressed juice of fresh ginger, it's so much more effective than dry ginger. Candy ginger, okay, but the fresh juice has really strong antiviral properties and is warming. Stork's bill, which is erodium, I think. Anyway, stork's bill is an herb. It can be used to induce sweating. Common milkweed, just regular old Asclepias, used to promote sweating. That's actually the root tea which is used. Be careful with that plant though, because it has a milky latex that can cause blisters, and if it gets in your eyes, it can make you blind. So be very careful with milkweed. You just want to use the root in this one, and again, maybe they're better herbs, right? Bee balm, Monarda. Monarda leaf and tea, leaf and flower tea is excellent. It's really excellent. One of the favorite herbal remedies of Native Americans, one of the most popular beverages, a tea plant among early settlers, and one of the prettiest plants, flowers you're ever going to have in the garden. It's just absolutely wonderful. Joe Pyeweed, which I mentioned, is one of our native eupatoriums. Really cool plant. With a neat history back when people were doing patent medicine and they were selling them with Wild West shows. At different times, people said Joe Pye was a Indian medicine man. At other times, they said he was a cowboy. And other times, they said he was just a sideshow huckster. Who knows, right? But during one of those epidemics, probably typhoid, he popularized Joe Pyeweed as an herb to help with fever and help get rid of the virus. And it does that. It's really good. And that's another one that's like super hardy. I mean, you can grow it down to maybe zone 2, 2B, 3A, and all the way up to like zone 10. I mean, Joe Pyeweed is so easy to grow. Actually, pretty plant. Honestly, it's kind of tall. It can get about 6 feet tall, and kind of weedy, But it gets these nice big purple flowers on there, and you could definitely mix some of these up and have a real pretty little flower garden. That's also very useful. Burdock. Burdock root tea can be used to induce sweating. Kudzu root tea can be used to induce sweating. Two of people's most hated herbs, but they're such wonderful herbal medicine and edible. Literally, burdock and kudzu are both edible and very nutritious. And if people grew them as a food crop instead of trying to eradicate them as weeds, they could do a lot to help with hunger and malnutrition. Speedwell, Veronica officinalis. This is one of the old popular, it's officinalis. It means it was in the officina. This is one that the monks went and got to use to help people resolve a fever by inducing sweating, amongst other properties. Speedwell, that's Veronica, as I said. Viper's bug loss. One of the, I just love the name of that plant. I mean, how does someone come up with the word Viper's bug loss? Yeah, it's an oddly named herb, but it's been traditionally used, the leaf tea, to promote sweating, reduce inflammation, and act as an expectorant. Perilla is it's another herb in the mint family. One I think has more use in Asian herbal medicine, but it's used to induce sweating. Anise hyssop. Anise hyssop is a really nice herb, leaf tea used for colds and coughs and to induce sweating and fevers. American pennyroyal, also one of the mints. It's a strong mint. Never use the essential oil of pennyroyal internally. The one case, the one documented case of someone being poisoned by an herb in America and dying, I believe it was either America or Canada, I can't remember, was a woman who had read that pennyroyal could induce abortion, and so she used it as an abortifacient, and she took the essential oil internally and bled to death through every orifice of her body. So, pretty horrible way to die. Pretty horrible way for two people to die. Be very careful of pennyroyal in essential oil form. Used as a mint, it's just a good, strong mint. But don't probably shouldn't use any of the mint families or anything with strong essential oils when you're pregnant. I mean, I always say I don't recommend any herbs when you're pregnant. If you're a woman interested in herbs for pregnancy, look at Susan Weed's books. Look at Rosemary Gladstar. Look at their books. They're the experts on herbs for women's health. I'm not. Deer's tongue is such a very useful herb, and it's another one that's been overharvested. But the leaf tea of the plant used to induce sweating. A little bit of caution, even though this is an incredibly useful herb, it contains coumarin. Now, coumarin on its own is the sweet smell of hay. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's probably not going to hurt anybody. But if it ferments, it can become like coumadin, which is a blood thinner and can cause liver damage and hemorrhage. So whenever we have an herb that has that smell of sweet hay to it, always think, well, this herb has coumarin in it, and it needs to be carefully dried and cared for. We don't want to let this herb, if we choose to use it, ferment. The whole Artemisia family, okay, wormwood, white sage, mugwort, sweet annie, Russian tarragon, southernwood. The Artemisias are the go-to for colds, flus, fevers, have antiviral properties, antiseptic properties, antibiotic properties, anthelmintic properties. I could go on and on. Diaphoretic properties. The Artemisias are fantastic, and some of them like wormwood. Again, don't ever use the essential oils of wormwood. You can die. And don't use any of these plants if you're pregnant. They have what you call, well, anthelmintic or worm-killing properties, vermifuge properties. That's the word I'm searching for. The vermifugal, they kill parasites. Well, if they kill parasites, they're also not good for a little person living inside of you. Barberry root tea can be used to promote sweating. It's very much like gentian. It's in its effect, and it's got some strong antiviral properties and antiseptic properties. Elderberry, of course, everybody is familiar now that elderberry syrup is good for colds and flus. Well, it's also good to help induce sweating. Spice bush, one of my absolute favorite herbs to find in the woods. And I mean, I sniff this one out. It smells like allspice. I absolutely love it. Tea made from the bark can be used to induce sweating. And again, if you live where spice bush grows, if you can grow some spice bush, do so. You're going to love this plant. It's wonderful, actually. um, yeah, if you're familiar, like with Jamaican cooking, jerk chicken, and they use what they call the allspice bush, it's sort of our American cousin to it. It smells and tastes and can be used the same way, and really good. Eastern hemlock, that's Suga. Leaf needle twig tea used to induce sweating. Also really great for coughs. And of course, we're talking the hemlock tree. We're not talking water hemlock or poison hemlock. No, those are very different herbs that are not trees. Do not confuse the two. Eastern red cedar, that's Junipera virginiana. We just call it red cedar in the South. It's everywhere. It's actually a juniper. You can eat the berries. You can do twig and needle tea. It's wonderful. It's good for coughs and colds and fevers and flus and all that. American ash bark tea has been used for sweating. And Dutchman's pipe, which is Aristolochia, very much used in the colonies early days for sweating, for fevers. Rattlesnake fern. This is one of the ferns. Root tea used to induce sweating, and is expectorant, as is crested wood fern. Root tea used to induce sweating and for congestion and fever. With the ferns, I always have to say some of them have been found, including the commonly eaten bracken fern, to be carcinogenic. The only one that has been studied and proven non-carcinogenic and perfectly edible is the ostrich fern. It's important to know your ferns, okay? But a lot of people believe that the man who invented the eclectic school of medicine, his name won't come to me right now, is a French guy. The eclectics and the Thomsonians were the two main schools, very interrelated, of herbal medicine in let's just say mid 1800s in America, to the point that they were really rivaling the professional medical practice, and there were all kinds of lawsuits and scurrilous charges brought against them, trying to, outlaw the use of herbal medicine. That's what they were doing at the time, was trying to outlaw the use of herbal medicine. Well, a lot of times they didn't help themselves. I mean, there was a body snatching scandal that was associated with them. The guy that invented eclectic medicine died of cancer, and it was charged at the time, whether it's true or not, nobody knows, was because he was using maidenhair fern. I don't know if it was regular maidenhair fern or Venus maidenhair fern, but that was one of his preferred herbal remedies, and it has been found to be somewhat carcinogenic. Now, Charles Thompson, fascinating guy, he really pioneered the use of lobelia in America. He used it basically as an emetic. He used it to make people throw up. And it was one of his go-to remedies. Well, one of his patients died. The doctors and families sued him. It went through a huge scandal in court. He was later proven completely innocent. It was proven that his herbal remedies were entirely safe. And what was furthermore, it was proven that the herb that was given to this lady that was labeled lobelia was not lobelia at all. It had come from a bad apothecary. Interesting history on those, but I just kind of want, just warn you on the ferns whenever the subject of ferns come up. I do like ferns as herbs, okay? But I don't want you to take a risk with your health, even if I think it's worth taking a risk for my health, obviously, okay? So, y'all have a great week. Stay warm, and I will talk to you next time. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.